Hello, everyone. This is the breakdown, and I'm Jay Mechi. I'm yet again covering for Yesterday and Runmila. And today we will be talking about Juneteenth, but also Caribbean Heritage Month, and it's also Black Music Heritage Month. It's a lot of things this month. There's a lot going on, and also Pride. There's a lot of things going on. It's also my birthday month, so June is one of my favorite months, of course. But first, talking about Caribbean Heritage Month, I wanted to talk about this because there are so many figures in revolutionary history that come from the Caribbean. And, I just wanted to honor some of them by naming them out and talking about a little bit about their work. And, I hope that folks take some notes and see if there's some figures maybe you haven't heard of or that maybe you've heard of but haven't read yet. Yeah. Um, and all right, so hold on one moment while I look at my notes. One thing one person I wanted to talk about who is incredible in terms of Caribbean history is Claudia Jones. A lot of people, I'm sure, know Claudia Jones. She was originally from Trinidad, and she came to the U.S. She had this publishing company. She was an amazing journalist. I believe that she ended up being deported from the U.S., of course, because they can't have revolutionary thinking Black folks living in the U.S. because that's a threat to the status quo, especially a Black woman. And so she wrote this essay. It was called An End to the Neglect of the Problems of the Negro Woman. And it talks about, what she calls the triple oppression that women face based on race, class, and gender. And she called for the Communist Party at the time to address the specific issues of Black women. And she talked about how Black women's struggles are central to the broader fight for social justice. And so, a lot of people nowadays, they talk about intersectionality, Kimberly Crenshaw's legal liberal framework. And long before intersectionality was even a thing, Claudia Jones was talking about triple oppression. And she wasn't just talking about it in the sense of with intersectionality, that original case that Kimberly Crenshaw was referring to was a case of was an employment case. So it was Black women were suing, and they were in they were in a corporate environment or something. And so the class analysis isn't really there in the intersectional framework the way that it is in Claudia Jones's framework. So I definitely recommend folks check that out if you haven't already. It's a really incredible essay. You can, Google it. You should be able to find it. Again, it's called An End to the Neglect of the Problems of the Negro Woman. And she also wrote this other essay. It was called We Seek Full Equality for Women. That again was calling on the Communist Party at the time to prioritize gender equality and women's rights within its agenda. Because for some reason, the Communist Party in the US was just, not doing a good job of representing everybody and wasn't doing a good job of supporting Black people. Meanwhile, on the other side of the Atlantic, the Communist Party was legalizing abortions, legalizing birth control, getting women to the workforce, increasing women's literacy, all that kind of stuff. So, the Communist Party in the U.S. was very much not doing that. And so We Seek Full Equality for Women, that essay, which she wrote in 1949, was, her really saying Communist Party in the U.S. really needs to get it together. And she argued that the liberation of women was essential for the success of socialist movements, which obviously, that should go without saying, right? But, this was controversial back in the day. The idea that the liberation of women was essential to the success of socialist movements. Women are half the population. So, for me, it feels like common sense, but, people get blinded by, chauvinism, I guess. That besides Claudia Jones, I also wanted to mention Maurice Bishop. I don't know if folks have heard of him, but he uh, he did a lot of speeches, and because he was the prime minister of Grenada, and he didn't really like write things, but you can like read his writing, his speeches, um, and they reflect his beliefs. And he had this like New Jewel movement, which did all these social reforms, including free healthcare and like education and promotion of women's rights. And he was like a big influence in a lot of African liberation movements all over the world. I remember when I went to Ghana, we kept hearing this phrase, forward ever, backward never. And we were hearing it so often in Ghana that I was under the impression that it was Kwame Nkrumah that actually coined it, but it was Maurice Bishop, and Kwame Nkrumah did use it, but he got it from Maurice Bishop, apparently. So definitely recommend forward ever, backward never. That's a collection of his speeches and writings. And these are some writings that emphasize anti-imperialism and the importance of grassroots involvement in the political process. And definitely recommend, if you haven't heard of Maurice Bishop, look him up, check him out. He's an incredible guy. And let's see. So, and CLR James is another person. I don't know if folks have heard of him. I'm trying to remember exactly where he came from. I should know this off the top of my head, but Trinidad again. Yeah, he was from Trinidad as well. And he was really famous. He wrote The Black Jacobins, which was like a really groundbreaking work, and it talks about the Haitian Revolution. Basically he used the Haitian Revolution as a case study to talk about broader themes of anti-colonialism and race and class struggle. Marxism, there's a lot of like historiography, right? Like talking about protagonisms in the struggle and writing the story of history and that kind of thing. And so thinking about the Marxist historiography, that lineage, he really made a lot of significant contributions to it. And, talking about the history of revolution, talking about the history of class struggle, and, bringing the Haitian Revolution into that was something that wasn't really done before him. So, I recommend him for sure. And let's see, who else? Let's see. So also, so another thing is CLR James. He wrote Beyond a Boundary, which it was part memoir, part social commentary. And this book was, talks about like his love for cricket, which is funny, but he also talks about like colonialism and race and British imperialism. And it's funny because it's a sports book, but people talk about it like, I've heard it's called like the greatest sports book of all time. And it's this like seminal text in post-colonial studies, but it's like a sports book. So that's kind of one of his lesser known works. But The Black Jacobins was, one of his famous ones. And of course, there is the one that I'm sure most people have heard of, because, he has, revolutionized Marxist theory, and he's just such an incredible contributor to revolutionary works. And so, of course, Walter Rodney, and he was from Grenada, and he wrote How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, which is this incredible work. Definitely recommend. Folks haven't read it, do read that. Like, you have to read that. And if folks who have read it, feel free in the chat, like, let me know, or even write like, what are some of the things that you got out of it? I'd love to hear, what other folks got out of that text, because it's a very famous text. It's, the best, one of the best. And it's this magnum opus. It critiques the exploitation and underdevelopment of Africa due to Europe's colonialism. And it provides this really detailed economic and historical analysis. He just talks about how colonialism deliberately stunted Africa's development to benefit European powers. And of course, these are things we, as revolutionaries take for granted, but this work really like lays it out and really talks, provides an enormous amount of detail and expertise on this topic. So folks should check that out for sure. And he also wrote another. He has another collection of essays. It's called "The Groundings with My Brothers," and this is something that is lesser known. Most people haven't read, and it's basically a collection of essays and lectures that reflect, his interaction with the Black Power movement in Jamaica, which is where my people are from. So yeah, he basically went to Jamaica and was linked up with the Black Power movement there, and he learned a lot, and he ended up writing some essays about it, and in those essays he talks about like the importance of like grassroots education, popular education. He talks about like radical political action and the fight against imperialism. It's interesting collection of essays. So I also definitely recommend that. And another incredible author who I'm sure most people have heard of is Frantz Fanon. Frantz Fanon, it's so funny because he's from Martinique, and maybe this is my own ignorance. But for the longest time, I thought that Martinique was part of Africa. I think it was because, I know he went to Algeria, and I figured like, oh, maybe he just went across a few borders to go to Algeria. But now that I know that Martinique is actually in the Caribbean. Um, and yeah, so he wrote a lot of amazing texts. Again, if you've read any of his texts, like throw it in the chat, or if you have a favorite quote or just a favorite idea that comes from his works, feel free to put it in the chat. So he wrote Black Skin, White Masks. And this really talks about like the psychological effects of colonialism and racism on Black people. And he talks about this like internalization of inferiority and the struggle for identity in a world dominated by white supremacy. So it's kind of similar to Du Bois's double consciousness idea. He talks about how, there's sort of like this, identity that is forced on you by white supremacy, but then there's also the identity that you have yourself. And there's a struggle to sort of reconcile those two things until you reject the identity that white society provides for you and lean into your own African anti-colonial identity. So another thing, so let's see. Another thing is, so he also wrote The Wretched of the Earth. And that's a revolutionary text that advocates for decolonialism, of course. And he talks about how violence is a necessary means of overthrowing colonial oppression. And he also talks about like the psychological and the cultural impacts of colonialization and colonization. And he argues for the creation of like a new national culture in post-colonial societies that's like rooted in Pan-African identity. Let's see. So another Caribbean person. Let's see. So of course there's the famous Marcus and Amy Garvey. Well, Amy's. There was actually two Amy's that he married. Both of them who were incredible journalists and authors in their own right. But some of the key writings that people can look into if they want to do some more research. There's a collection of his speeches and essays and articles that outline his vision for Black nationalism and Pan-Africanisms, and it's called The Philosophy and Opinions of Marcus Garvey. And in those essays and articles, he advocates for Black self-reliance and economic independence and the establishment of an African united homeland. And he also has Message to the People, which is the course of African philosophy. Well, Message to the People, and the subtitle is the course of African philosophy. Give me 1 second. So in the Message to the People, the course of African philosophy, It's basically like a compilation of speeches and lessons that are just intended to educate and inspire followers of the United Negro Improvement Association, of which he was one of the founders. And it emphasizes self-improvement and leadership and the importance of unity across people of African descent. And of course, all of this very much influenced a lot of other Jamaican thinkers that came after him, for example, Bob Marley and others. And so it was really like influential work, and his speeches and his essays were really like defined Pan Africanism in a way. Um, and Amy Ashwood Garvey in particular, she also did her own writings and speeches about Pan Africanism, but also about women's liberation and social justice. She was a co founder of the UNIA, and she played a lot of development. Significance in the early development, which a lot of people don't even know about her or the other Amy, because Marcus Garvey sort of gets all the attention. But yeah, Amy Ashwood Garvey was really important to that movement. She was advocating for the inclusion of women in leadership positions, and she also was emphasizing the importance of women's contributions uh, to the struggles around the world. So, yeah, those are some Caribbean thinkers that I wanted to mention. There are many, many, many more. But for now, we will, maybe leave it at that. Um, and yeah, so you know, it's also, I mentioned, Black Music History Month, and so I also wanted to talk about yeah, so I also want to talk about Black Music History Month. So with Black music history, obviously there are a lot of um, there's a lot of figures throughout Black history that had an influential place in the movement, and also there's a lot of ways in which the Black music industry has been co-opted um, and controlled for the sake of controlling Black people. So, back in the day, we had Paul Robeson, who, he was this amazing singer and civil rights activist. And, he was very, very outright with his strong leftist views, which was very unusual for the time, because this is like 50s, this is like McCarthyism era. And so he had this support for labor movements. He was all into anti-colonial struggles. He openly criticized capitalism, supported socialism, which, he was very persecuted during the McCarthy era. I know that he ended up, going to the Soviet Union and, seeking refuge there for a little bit, which I think is interesting, that he went there and he talked about how, in the Soviet Union, people were just looking at him like he was a man and not just like, a Black man or like an evil thing. And that's so different from how I think we would understand Russia today, where, you go to Russia today and, I've actually never been to Russia, so I can't say this, but I've been to Poland, and other places in Eastern Europe. And being a Black person in Eastern Europe is not the most comfortable experience. They are very much not treating you like a human being. And so to contrast, Soviet Russia with current Eastern Europe and the racial relations and how different they were. I think that's very interesting. So just wanted to shout out Paul Robeson, um, and of course Nina Simone is another person I wanted to shout out in terms of Black Music Month. She was such an influential singer and civil rights activist, and she talks about these issues of racial inequality and social justice. Um, but I have to say, I was disappointed to recently learn that Nina Simone was a Zionist, which was a shocking thing to hear. And like I said, it was a huge disappointment. But, I guess you can't, she was what she was, and, she's no longer with us, and there's really nothing you can do about it. So I accept the complex figure that she is, and understand that, while she maybe highlighted issues of racial inequality and social justice, she also had some, problematic and wrong ideas about, geopolitics that were common during that time and are common to this day. So, not to say that it's excusable, but just to say that it's it's understandable to a certain extent. So, it's a disappointment to find that out about her. But again, I hold her with complexity. And another musical figure, I really wanted to shout out was, Billie Holiday, of course. She had that song "Strange Fruit," which was talking about lynching. And I heard that after she recorded that song, like her life was basically ruined. Like her career was ruined. The industry, like, just shuttered her out, obviously, because um, you can't have music that actually draws attention to racial inequalities and racial injustice, especially during that time, but even now to this day. And so, yeah, she never really recovered from the harm she received as a result of putting out that incredible song. And so, yeah, I just want to, yeah, hold her in our hearts, because she was so influential and so persecuted at the same time. And one of my favorite, I've been talking a lot about U.S. singers so far, and um, a lot of them are pretty far in the past. So, just to talk about some figures, first of all, I'll talk about international, but also closer to our current time period. Fela Kuti is just one of my favorite musicians of all time, and I'm sure most people have heard of him. But if you haven't heard of Fela Kuti, please look him up. Look up his music. His music is really incredible. He's a Nigerian musician. He's a pioneer, basically, of Afrobeat music. You know how, like, you can't turn on TikTok without seeing a new Afrobeat trend, and nowadays everything is Afrobeat. Like, he was really the pioneer of that style of music. And his lyrics were very political. He talks a lot about global imperialism, and he talks about, like, the oppression that he receives, like, by the Nigerian government. And he was very much like a committed socialist, and he used his music to promote Pan-Africanism and Marxist ideals. So, huge shout out to Fela Kuti. Has one song that's like, water has no enemy, and it just talks about resources, and how that factors in the struggle, and yeah, it's an incredible work. Um, and another person I wanted to highlight was Gil Scott Heron, who was like a poet and basically a spoken word artist. And his work was also very much addressing different social and political issues, and he critiqued capitalism and systemic oppression. You might have heard the phrase, "the revolution will not be televised." It is based off of his song, "The Revolution Will Not Be Televised," which definitely go listen to that. Even if you have listened to it before, it's interesting. It's a good reminder, and really talks about, like, the need for radical social change. And he has another song, I think, what is it called? Like Whitey on the Moon. Yeah, something like Whitey on the Moon. And it's about how, you know, in Black neighborhoods all over the country and all over the world, people are dying and struggling, and they're not given the resources that they need. Meanwhile, we're spending millions and now billions on, things like space travel, which who is that serving exactly? Who, like, how is that really benefiting the masses of people? So definitely recommend Gil Scott Heron. Um, and just some more recent folks that I wanted to mention. Um, so I don't know if folks have heard of the coup. Boots Riley, who is a part of the coup. I follow him on Twitter. Definitely, like, look him up on social media. His social media is really good. But he's a self-identified communist, and he uses his music to promote revolutionary change. So it's, yeah, his music is really incredible. Boots Riley in particular, he's a rapper, he's a producer, he's an activist, and his lyrics are often criticizing capitalism and police brutality and systemic oppression. So if you haven't listened to his work, I definitely recommend it. And another thing that I think is interesting is I don't know if folks have seen. He's also like a director. So he directs films, and a lot of his films are incredible. So one of them is Sorry to Bother You. If you've seen Sorry to Bother You, that was Boots Riley. Um, and yeah, he's got other things as well. I think he was also working on, what was that? But I'm a Virgo, I think, or something. I'm a Virgo. Yes, I'm a Virgo. Definitely interesting, a really interesting, yeah, really interesting sort of surrealist, like Afro surrealist. Actually, both, I would say. Um, uh, I'm a Virgo, and Sorry to Bother You are sort of that Afro surrealist style of social commentary, where it's almost that uncanny valley. Which, if folks don't know what uncanny valley is, it's like this idea of you see a robot or an android or a thing that looks sort of like a human, but not really. It gives you this pit in your stomach. It gives you almost like a feeling of sickness, like something is wrong or evil. And they say that that actually is an evolutionary instinct related to viewing corpses, which is an interesting fact. But that's neither here or there. But his works have this kind of uncanny valley where, like, so it looks a lot like our society, and it's mirroring our society. But there's certain surrealist absurdities in it that obviously are not in our world, and they highlight the injustices and the absurdities of the world that we live in. So check out his stuff, his music, as well as his different films and TV shows and stuff like that. Um, and yeah, so another incredible Black musician. I want to highlight this Black Music Month. Grace Jones. She's also Jamaican, so she can kind of go in both the Black music and the Caribbean Heritage Month category. Um, Everyone knows Grace Jones. She's a singer, she's a songwriter. She's known for her like bold avant-garde style, and she has these very politically charged performances, and her whole vibe, like her whole everything about her has always just challenged social norms, and she's so like comfortable in sitting with that like challenging nature, and like if you see her on interviews and stuff like that, it's so incredible to see her just challenging sort of the normative structure in so many ways, both in the way she looks, but also in the way that she talks and she speaks. And she's always, she was criticizing capitalist exploitation. So Grace Jones, incredible. She's one of my favorites. So another person I want to highlight for um, uh, Black Music Month is Dead Prez. They're a hip hop duo. They have the very revolutionary lyrics, Marxist influence, and their music talks a lot about racial and economic injustice, and it promotes Black liberation. They have a song Hip Hop. You probably heard it, even if you don't like consciously know you've heard it, because I feel like that song is so common, that it's an incredible song. And yeah, I was curious if other folks know of any musicians they want to highlight for Black Music Month or Caribbean Heritage Month. And let's look at some of these, highlight some of the comments. This is from earlier. So yeah, I have to know about Claudia Jones. Yeah, I mean, Claudia, it's interesting because, I mentioned that people talk a lot about intersectionality. And, I was talking with somebody, was meeting with somebody, and they were talking about like, yeah, I want to do this presentation on intersectionality. And I was just like, well, okay, like, have you heard of Claudia Jones? And of course, they hadn't heard of Claudia Jones. This is someone that was sort of considering themselves like an expert in intersectionality. And I'm like, well, you should really sort of know the lineage, because long before, Kimberly Crenshaw was, writing about this corporate lawsuit, which is where this idea of intersectionality came from. Claudia Jones was talking about triple oppression and the relation between race, gender, and class. And so she really bridged all three, rather than intersectionality just tends to look, in that specific case, that she was writing about, she was really only looking at gender and race, but she doesn't have like the class analysis, so that's really missing. But Claudia Jones, she does have that, and so I definitely recommend her work. And yeah, so yeah, male supremacy, like white supremacy, has been rife in U.S. leftist movements. Yeah, this is probably in. I think this was in relation to what I was talking about with the Communist Party at the time. It wasn't really concerned about Black issues. Wasn't really concerned about women, and I think that was probably the downfall of the communist movement in the U.S. That's why it never really picked up steam, because it was kind of like, at the time, even now to this day, a little bit a white man movement. And yeah, there was definitely, male supremacy, is part of white supremacy, is something I think it's important to understand. The way that the hierarchy exists in our society is a direct result of, European colonization. And so US leftist movements, they're still colonized, even if they're trying to be decolonized, which most are not necessarily trying to be decolonized. But yeah, they're colonized movements, and so they have these ideas that are rife in colonized thinking, which includes white supremacy, male supremacy, all of these things. So yes, that is so true. And yeah, I mentioned the Combahee River Collective, and again, in relation to this, the idea of triple oppression and intersectionality. After the Combahee River Collective made very clear that they got their ideology, which is another precursor to intersectionality. They got their ideology from Claudia Jones and the other Black women feminists, that were not feminists, Black women Marxists at the time, who were really, writing about the intersection between race, class, and gender. So they really learned a lot from Claudia Jones and expanded on that framework. And so yeah, they're definitely important figures in revolutionary history. Um, Yeah, so Angela Davis, a former CP USA member, has written several books specifically to Black women in the US. I've read Are Prisons Obsolete? And I know that there's a book, I think it's literally called Race, Class, Gender, or something like that. Um, I think I think it's called that. But that's on my list. I have not read it yet, but I have heard some incredible things about it. But I think, again, I talked about how Nina Simone is a complex figure, and I want to say the same thing about Angela Davis, in the sense that there are some contributions that I will not deny that she has done to, like, revolutionary thinking, and I also think that at times, she was an active philosophy professor at UCLA for a long time, and you know not to say that academics are inherently liberal, but I think academia itself is counter-revolutionary sometimes. And I think that sometimes it can take people that are have a revolutionary mindset and sort of placate them. And I say this as somebody that was in academia. I was studying critical race theory. I have my master's, and I noticed that I thought that I was really doing something, writing these papers, reading these books. And then, I had a wake up call one day. I was living in Memphis, and I just remember, going to downtown, and there was all these families, like, lined up to get some food, all these homeless families, with small children and everything. And I was like, there's nothing that I'm doing in this moment that is contributing to the material reality of these Black people, of the masses. And I realized in that moment that I was totally deluded about my contribution. And so I bring all that up to say that, again, there's a lot of amazing contributions that Angela Davis has done. She was arrested for her contributions, especially back in the day. She was, like, really on it. But lately, some things that she's done and said, I've just been like, you know, the liberalism is starting to seep through, you know? So that's all I'll say about that. Take what from that what you want. But I will check out some of her. I still, I'm all about reading, all sorts of folks, and I definitely have a bunch of her books still in my list to read, that I'm looking forward to checking out. And Dr. CBS is one of the great emerging Black women scholars. Yeah, I've heard of her, and yeah, I think I follow her on Twitter. Yeah, yeah, Black Black Left AF. And so, yes, there's a book, Black Scare, Red Scare, and I that came out I think just recently, and it talks about capitalist racism basically, and how the I guess the Red Scare so tied up with suppressing Black liberatory movements. See, I believe that just came out this year, maybe last year. But that book, Black Scare, Red Scare, on my to-do list of reading because I've heard it's amazing. I've heard she's an incredible scholar. I follow her on Twitter and on I think on IG, and she's always posting incredible stuff. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up. And please don't overlook Shirley Graham Dubois. I don't know who that is, which makes me feel like I should obviously know who that is. Um, yeah. So okay. I was just looking her up. But she's an American Ghanaian writer, playwright, composer, and activist. Very cool. So I'm definitely going to look more into her. And I mean, so I figured she's married to W.B. Du Bois. Um, yeah, cool. I'll definitely look into her because she seems really interesting. And the reason why I was highlighting very specific people is because of Caribbean Heritage Month. So it's like I know that there's like an endless list of incredible people that are doing great things, but just wanted to highlight specifically some Caribbean folks. And yeah, but this person is really interesting. I'm gonna look into her. Um, and yeah, thanks for that. And see, a big Fela Kuti fan, me too. Um, yeah, huge fan of him. Like again, if you have not listened to his music, even if you have listened to his music, just go back and listen to it today. Just like fill yourself with that like revolutionary spirit and listen to his music because it's incredible. Um, and yeah, so I'm a Virgo is revolutionary piece. So sorry to bother you. 100% agree. Boots Riley, incredible director, incredible producer. In addition to being an incredible rapper musician, definitely check out I'm a Virgo. Sorry to bother you. Again, it's that sort of like Afro surrealist political commentary, which is probably my favorite genre, in my opinion. I love that genre. Um, so check out his stuff. It's incredible. All right. Yeah. So those were some of the comments. Just wanted to highlight. Thanks for contributing. And so now we've talked about Black Music Month, and Caribbean Heritage Month. And I wanted to talk a little bit about Juneteenth, which is coming up. And Juneteenth is interesting because I grew up in the Northeast, and Juneteenth was not really something that we ever celebrated. It was, I think, a very much a regional holiday in a lot of ways. And the only when I first heard about it when I turned 18, or like when I was 18, going to college in Florida, because Florida is much closer to Texas, and I think that some people in Florida were celebrating it at the time. I was living in Tallahassee, which Tallahassee has FAMU there, so the HBCUs have been celebrating Juneteenth for a minute. In that show Atlanta, I don't know if people have seen it. There's a Juneteenth episode that is kind of funny that reminds me of HBCU celebrations of Juneteenth. That's all I'll say about it. Just check it out. But yeah, it wasn't the thing that I'd ever really had familiarity with until college, and even then, the only reason why I had that familiarity is because I had like moved to the South. And so this is very much like a regional holiday that in a way I felt like it was almost like an ancestral holiday, in the sense that people that were likely descendants of the people that were freed during this time, were celebrating their freedom. And meanwhile, in the North, people had been freed for a long time before that. Not to say that they were free in the sense of they were equal participants in society or had rights or anything, but technically they weren't under chattel slavery. And so this holiday, it's interesting how you know So I just want to bring up something that is sitting on my spirit. I don't know if folks saw what's his name, Billy. I forgot his name, but he's gonna play. He's supposed to be playing James Baldwin in this new biopic, which is horrendous because James Baldwin was this incredible figure and he was a revolutionary, and this person who was trying to play him is very much not that, very much a liberal sort of shuck and jiver. And there is this picture going around the internet right now of a Juneteenth celebration, and it was like Kirk Franklin was there, and like all of these, Black musicians, which I didn't get into this earlier, but this idea of like the Black music industry being co-opted is a huge thing. It's very interesting to think about, but yeah, so they're having this big event in the White House for Juneteenth, and it's I have to say, like, it is fascinating to see, them throwing these like crumbs out, right? Like they're celebrating, they're having like a concert at the White House in celebration of Juneteenth. And meanwhile, yesterday or the day before, it was like 2 days ago, the victims that are still alive of the Tulsa massacre did not get justice. Like their case was thrown out. And so just juxtaposing those two things, like you would think that the way that they're celebrating Juneteenth, that we've actually sort of reached, a level of, equality, and we've reduced oppression. And that's very much not the case. And, white supremacy is very much alive and well. And we have Jim Crow Joe as our current president, and he was one of the architects of mass incarceration, and he was a defender of segregation for a very long time. He was close friends with Strom Thurmond, the avid outspoken white supremacist, and that was like his mentor. And so this idea that like we've overcome since the first Juneteenth is pretty almost ludicrous. And so I wanted to bring up this one picture that I mentioned. I found it. So this is happening at the Juneteenth ceremony. Like this is happening at the Juneteenth ceremony. Like we as Black people, we are not free. Like this, if anything, will show you how many people are very much not free. So he's bending over, kissing the hand of Jim Crow Joe, kissing the hand of somebody who was directly responsible for the desecration and destruction of the Black community. And next to both of them, or in between both of them, clapping along, is Cop Mala, who was directly responsible for mass incarceration of Black men in California. So we have these two architects of mass incarceration that destroyed endless Black lives, that they destroyed generations of Black lives they've destroyed, and they're sitting here singing and clapping along to Kirk Franklin at a Juneteenth concert, getting their hand kissed by coons dressed in sparkles, and it's just like it just boggles my mind. But it goes to show like exactly what Juneteenth is. It is a spectacle. It is a distraction. And I'll caveat this by saying Juneteenth, as in the White House celebrations of Juneteenth and the corporate sales and the corporate exploitation of Juneteenth, is what I'm referring to. I'm not referring to the regional celebrations that have been occurring for a very long time that are rooted, like I said, in like almost in an ancestral practice. They are like recognizing their ancestors who were freed. So obviously, Juneteenth as a regional celebration, I think, can be a revolutionary thing and can be a really important thing. Juneteenth as this White House celebration with Black folks shucking and jiving and kissing the hands of Jim Crow Joe, like it's an abomination, really, and it goes to show exactly what Juneteenth has become, is this corporate celebration of of U.S. dominance in a way. And I was just thinking about how I live in Portland, and yesterday we had our Juneteenth fair, and of course the cops had a they had a stand at the Juneteenth thing, and it's like why are the cops there? Like that, those are the people that we need to be freed from. Like, why are we inviting them into Juneteenth spaces as if they should be welcome there? It makes absolutely no sense to me at all. And so, yeah, Juneteenth has really become this just another thing that they can market and sell. Another thing that they can just, slap the African pride flag onto things and expect us to assume that we're being revolutionaries by buying these things. And it's how they, it's one of the many things that U.S. imperialist society has co-opted and disarmed. Like this is what it does: it absorbs these revolutionary things and disarms them, and then spits them back at people. So people think that they're being revolutionary by participating in this thing that's actually very much counter-revolutionary. Like I could not think of anything less revolutionary or more counter-revolutionary than being at the White House, dancing and kissing the hand of the architect of mass incarceration. Like there's literally nothing less revolutionary than that. There's nothing more counter-revolutionary than that. And so I'm bringing all of this up to say it's just important that we be vigilant. We can't accept small, just insignificant symbolic wins. And I think that people have gotten used to accepting crumbs, accepting scraps, and applauding symbolic wins. And meanwhile, the actual material wins are not happening. Black people are very much worse off than they were, a couple decades ago. I was looking at a statistic that talked about Black doctors, and I could do actually a whole report about the Flexner report, which if you've never heard of it, Google it. Basically, the robber barons, the Carnegie Mellon and Rockefeller, they came together and they decided they wanted to standardize the U.S. medical system. They hired a businessman who was not a doctor. He just owned a profitable he owned like a profitable healthcare school or something, but he wasn't a doctor. So he went all over the place, and he basically rated all the he was determining whether all the different schools were up to snuff or not. And as a result of him doing this, every single Black medical school except for two were closed, and almost all midwife schools were closed, and the only thing left was these sort of white sterilized institutions. And it's very much beginning of our medical industrial complex. Like, so I'm bringing all of this up because of course I've like now forgotten why I was bringing this up. Lost my train of thought. But oh yeah, so I was reading about the rates of doctors, and after that school closed, they had something, it was like 1% of doctors were Black people. And that's the same number today. That number, like it has not increased. So for like 100 or so years, we've had the same amount of Black doctors. We haven't had material gains in terms of getting people better working conditions, a higher standard of living. Black people are still very much struggling. And when we have these material cases like the in Oklahoma, I'm of course blanking out now, but the Tulsa massacre, we have that case, where they were trying to get material compensation, and they threw that out, and all of the attempts at reparations, ended up being thrown out. So yeah, I mean, it's just it's just important that we stay vigilant. We have to understand that they are, when I say they, I mean like U.S. society, and the media and our government are very adept at understanding what is resonating with people, and understanding what is radicalizing people, and then absorbing those things and de-radicalizing them, and then quietly, covertly, selling those things back to people, so people are mistakenly believing that they are revolutionary, even though they're very much not. So yeah. Let's see. Sorry, I just wanted to check and make sure that I was covering everything I wanted to say. Um, yeah. So in a little bit, we'll be getting to Q&A. So if you have questions, make sure that you're writing it down or remember it, or put it in the chat. But before we do that, I think I'm going to go into announcements. Give me 1 second while I bring this up. Okay. All right. Announcements. Okay, 1 moment. I don't know why this is being strange, but all right. Apologies for the disruption, but I'm getting the announcements, and okay, there we go. All right, so here we are with the announcements. All right, so like I said, we will do the Q&A section soon, but make sure to prepare your questions, and if you can, share your name and location and then your question. Before that, we will go to announcements. So if today's program has inspired or motivated you, we call on you, African women worldwide, to join the African National Women's Organization. We are the only anti-colonial, anti-imperialist, revolutionary organization for Black women. And we have members in Africa, Europe, Latin America, and all around the US. ANWO is leading on everyday issues concerning African women. We're not just on the internet, we are on the ground in communities organizing for African liberation. Join the international collective of African women building the revolutionary capacity of African women. To learn more about membership and to join, visit anwouhuru.org/join. So show material support with the work of the African National Women's Organization. Show material support for the work of African National Women's Organization. Fund the Liberation Center of African Women by donating to ANWO today. Support the rehabilitation of historic St. Louis Black community. We are working on the international headquarters for African women, organizing the One Africa, One Nation flea market and farmers market in St. Louis to support African economic development, and we're doing all other events all over the country. ANWO is an organization of the African poor and working class, so we need your support to make these projects happen. If you can't become a member, consider becoming a sustaining donor. Don't wait until this program ends. Pledge your support now. With donation levels starting at $5 a month, start or renew your support today. We also accept one-time donations of any amount. And to donate anytime, go to anwouhuru.org/donate. Let's play this video. Oops. Well, actually, maybe we won't play the video. Should we play it? I don't know if. All right, let's do that so you all can see.
The African National Women's Organization Liberation Center is an ambitious initiative born from the vision to transform 4617 Natural Bridge Avenue into a vibrant facility. This space, generously donated by the African People's Education and Defense Fund, will become a working-class embassy, a hub for community empowerment, and a testament to the resilience of African people. But we can't achieve this vision alone. We need your support to bring this dream to life. Your donation toward our goal of raising $60,227 will fund the comprehensive rehabilitation of the property. Why should you donate? Because every contribution brings us one step closer to providing working-class African women with a property of their own, a place where they can heal, organize, and thrive. Why are we doing this? Because we are committed to advancing the cause of African self-determination. Our center will provide vital cultural, social, and community spaces that celebrate African people and serve as a catalyst for change. Additionally, as the headquarters of the African National Women's Organization, the center will serve as a national and local organizing space empowering African women and femmes in our struggles against the impact of colonial capitalism. Your support can make a profound difference in our efforts to uplift African women and femmes. Join us in our mission to strengthen our community, nurture resilience, and pave the way for a brighter, more equitable future. Together, we can ensure that the flame of African self-determination burns brighter than ever before. To donate and to learn more about the project, visit bit.ly/AnnualCenter1.
All right. So now that you've seen this incredible center, donate some money, please. All right. Wear your politics with Anwo. Anwo's shop features t-shirts, sweatshirts, travel bags, mugs, hoodies, and even socks. Profit from the merch sales support the campaigns of Anwo, including Arrest CPS, Uhuru Kijiji, Child Care Collective, and War Council. Become a decolonizer. Support Anwo Economic Development Project, Decolonize Hair and Body. Decolonize Hair and Body are natural personal care products that highlight ingredients and traditional care practices used by Indigenous people around the world, in addition to featuring images and quotes of African revolutionaries. And they're good. From butters and conditioners to oils, Decolonize has you covered from head to toe. Make your next purchase of skincare products from us at decolonize.com. And if you're in the DC metro area, purchase from us in person. Hands off Uhuru, hands off Africa. The trial date has been set, and the time is now to support the Uhuru 3 in our fight against U.S. indictments, defend the African freedom struggle, defend the African liberation struggle, defend the Uhuru movement. Find out how you can support. Go to handsoffuhuru.org. And if you've enjoyed today's program and would like to help us produce shows in 2024, volunteer with us. Anwo is looking for producers, interpreters, chat moderators for future broadcasts and for our convention. Email us at info@anwouhuru.org if you'd like to share your skills. Let's see. So Harriet's Daughters Books Club and Study Group is a monthly virtual discussion that centers around African liberation-related literature. For the month of May, we will be discussing the war before, the true life of becoming a Black Panther, keeping the faith in prison, and fighting for those left behind. Actually, I think that this month they're doing They Were Their Property. I think that was last month. They were doing the war before. And the next book club, I believe, is in when is it? It's July. But if you go to anwouhuru.org/events, you can find out when the next Harriet's Daughter Book Club meeting is, and you can also stay up to date of all our upcoming international, national, regional, local events and programs. So thanks for sticking through our announcements. Now I am wondering if anyone has questions. I see some comments. Uhuru, Portland, Oregon. Yeah, I mean it has its it has its upsides and downsides, I guess. I don't know if I quite rep Portland. I'm originally from New Jersey, so it's like I always sort of rep Jersey, but I've lived in Portland for 10 years, so I guess I could start repping it at some point, but you know. I have, let's see, Decolonize is wonderful. Yes, it is. It is really amazing. And I have, experienced it in moisturizing. It's incredible. So definitely check that out. So any questions? All right. Well, it looks like there's not many questions left, and we've gone through announcements, and I've said my piece. So I think we're gonna end today's programming. Oh, let me see. I see that July 21st is the next Harry's Daughters Book Club. So make sure to check that out. You can sign up at annualuhuru.org/events. So yeah, definitely check that out. So yeah, thanks for listening, and we will see you next time.